Lucy is a woman in a business workplace in the 1940s in North Carolina, and it's a very different atmosphere than I would say like a woman in a workplace would have today, but at the same time, she has a lively spirit and she's very inspired by Alice Murphy. And something I found really interesting was it was in the 1920s that women were first allowed to wear pants. And like that's just crazy to me because like if you put it in perspective, like how different the rights were and the vibe between genders at this time.
Daddy Murphy is kind of a tricky character. He's a small part, but he's very important to the plot and to Alice, the lead's plight. My biggest concern was not making him just a big, gruff, grouchy guy, because I actually, after rehearsing and going through the character, I don't think he is. I think he's just very pious, and he's a man of faith, and he is very set in his beliefs, and that's how he lives. So when anything gets in the way of that, he doesn't really know how to cope, and he's trying to do what he thinks is right. He's not trying to be the bad guy. And you see between Act 1 and Act 2 how the choices he makes affects him as a person and how he feels about that. So my biggest thing was making sure he was layered and not just like a yelly, angry father.
Also too, I looked back actually on the characters in the show that first did with Front Porch Theatrical's Violet, because that was also set in North Carolina, and that was a wonderful opportunity to sort of dig into the culture of the region, the mores, the traditions, the conventions, the way that communities relate, and the way that people within them relate to one another. And that helped me really think about this particular character and where he would fit, this attorney, who is the kind of the right-hand man of the mayor, would fit into the whole scope of this story, this village, this group of people, and what his role would be relating to them.
My character it's very hard to actually understand because I can't comprehend a lot of the things that drive him. Without giving away too much, he's not the kindest character in the world. I had to really look into what it's like to be a powerful man, to be somebody who has built this entire empire from the ground up with his family, and the drive that he has to preserve it. It eclipses everything. It consumes him. It consumes him completely. From the idea of he thinks that he's taking care of his family, but he's hurting his family at the same time, which is counteractive to what he really wants, which is his family to have fame and success. But he ends up dragging them down in the pursuit of that success.
Well, for my track in particular, since I play a handful of different roles, depending on the scene, I always try and find something new for that character to discover. Edna, I've made her more of the maternal role, but if it's an ensemble dance number, I'm not Edna, I'm Norma, who frequents the Shiny Penny, and she's a local, and so she has those friendly relationships with everybody in the scene.
So Margo is a very interesting character. I read the script through a couple times, and there are some areas where she has sort of like a little zing. So I think it's really easy to overlook those parts of her and play her as a really demure, sweet girl, when really she has like this kind of weird undertone to her. So that's definitely going to be a challenge to bring out. But I have been trying to figure out ways that I can weasel that through.
So a lot of the work that I do with getting into a character is I like to use images to kind of get into the sense of a character. So dirty privilege, dirty thing that I do, I guess, is I use Pinterest. I like to go on Pinterest and find certain pictures from the time period, finding sometimes aesthetically pleasing pictures, maybe clothes that people would wear during the time, a lot of references to different like cars, things like that, and getting a scale of the landscape. Obviously this is set in North Carolina, so it's very different than Pennsylvania, but that's kind of more or less what I get into when doing a show like this.
So I feel that this is a two-parter. The first thing, which I'm sure a lot of people have said, is just the North Carolina dialect, which is specific. A lot of people think that Southern accents are just, you know, it's just one blanket statement sort of accent, but this is specific. So working with the dialect coach, which has been so helpful, has really been great, and just kind of, and really honestly, it just helps us dive into that world to tell the story. It makes it more authentic too. So I feel that that's part one. And part two, my character, even though this is a show that is, you know, there's some heavy stuff in this show, I think that Steve Martin writes it so well because the comedy arrives just when we need it. And I am solely there to provide comedy too. I don't have any serious moments, but that's fun for me. I usually get cast in the opposite role, so this has been really fun. So I think as far as special preparation, just kind of going through the script with a fine-tooth comb and finding ways to really make every moment count without going too over the top, and still making Darrel human and not cartoonish, and still being able to provide those moments of levity when we need them the most.
You can come on home to me.